So, I'd like to start with a song. Praise you, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, how I love you more and more. I am finding out the greatness of thy loving heart. That song is just on my mind, and oh, Jesus. Thank you. We praise you for your love and that you're showing your love to us. I don't know what to say here. We're looking at communion, the remembrance meal, the Lord's Supper, the new covenant meal. What do you want me to remember? So, as we look at communion, I want to look at it as the way a little child would. So if I were a little child at the Last Supper, if I were a little child there looking at it, well, first off, what is communion, right? It's bread and a cup. Hey, let's just, I just want to take that now. It's bread, all right? I've got that, and I've got this. But it's not bread and some juice, or in my case, water. That's not what this is about at all. And you know that, but it has nothing to do with that. Now, as a little kid, sometimes I thought that, but that's not what I want to see as a little kid. I want to come and I want to see what would a little child have seen there. What would have been the most memorable thing there? It has nothing to do with some specific kind of food or drink, nothing to do with any outward thing. The most obvious thing to a little kid would have been the crucifixion. That was so visual and so visually in your face. That is what these elements are. The bread is actually his body. And if I were there as a little kid, I would have seen that with my own eyes. His body broken, hanging there on the cross, ripped up by that scourge, his blood pouring down from his head, from his hands, from his feet, from his back, from his beard where it had been pulled out. Sacrifice. One word. That is one word. Love. I deserve to be punished. He took the punishment. And as a little kid, I love the simplicity of the way a little kid looks at things, because Jesus said, unless you come to me like a little child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven, which means everything theological can be understood by a little child. So we don't need to overcomplicate things. He says in these portions in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and 1 Corinthians, where he's talking about the Lord's Supper, he says, there's this word that shows up repeatedly. He says, remember. So the purpose of the Lord's Supper isn't the bread or the wine or any of that stuff. It's the remembering. I don't even have to have bread or wine to remember. However, having that tangible item, that bread, his body on the cross, torn up, his blood pouring down, that tangible, drinking some of that, eating some of that, as a tangible reminder that's really visual. So it sticks. He says, eat this as often as you do in remembrance of me. And I love that word often, because I was thinking about that word. If a little child were thinking of that word, what would be the most natural thing? What was the thing that comes to my mind as I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a little child as I look at communion? As often as you eat this or drink this, do this in remembrance of me. So every time I eat something, the food, the eating it, every time I pick up a cup, I'm drinking something. That act, that physical thing, is a picture reminder. However, with communion, I think we've gotten so used to it as a symbolic thing, as a religious, like bread and wine, that I want to just emphasize here for a second how important this is, and that it is purely just a picture, that the remembrance is actually the essence here. what God's looking for is that we remember Jesus. He says, do this in remembrance of me. And so just an illustration for myself, if I wanted to remember something good, like say I want to pray for my family and send them a quick text message often to encourage them, I might set a picture in my head. So every time I get on the stairs, I will shoot a text message to someone in my family just with a word of encouragement, like Jesus is alive, or you're his daughter, right? I'm just going to shoot him a quick message every time I get on stairs. There's nothing important about the stairs. It's just a picture to remind me of something good that I want to remember. I want to remember my family member, pray for them, ask, hey God, who do you want me to pray for? Right? It's just, the stairs are meaningless. That's not what's important here. Just like the bread and the water or wine, it's meaningless. What's important is the picture, but it's a picture that is so valuable. What's important is the memory, not the picture. The remembering is so valuable that he says, as often as you eat, as often as you drink, remember. But there's another thing here that would really stand out to me as a little child, and there's another word in each of these portions of Scripture that Jesus emphasizes, and it shows up in each of these portions of Scripture where he's talking about the Lord's Supper, and that is the new covenant. This is the blood of the new covenant. Jesus was making a new covenant. So I want to remember Jesus' love for me as illustrated by his sacrifice. He took the punishment for me, and that is so beautiful and life-changing as I've discovered it. I want to remember that and stay in remembrance of that. But there's something more here as well. There is a new covenant. And now to a little child, that can be a little bit confusing, because in Hebrews it says a new covenant can only be established when someone dies. And Jesus died and left. So if I'm a little child looking at the crucifixion, I see Jesus dying and leaving. And that's confusing because I don't see how that's a good thing. But it is a good thing, and I want to illustrate that for you visually so you can see how powerful what he wants us to remember is. He wants us to remember the new covenant. And what does that look like? Well, this new covenant, under the old covenant, Jesus was walking around in Galilee. And so if I, as a little child, wanted to be with Jesus, I needed to go to Galilee and find where he was, and then I could walk around with him. But under the new covenant, Jesus said, it is good that I go away, which to a little child, this doesn't make any sense. Why is it good that Jesus is going to die and go away? This doesn't make any sense. But he says, it is good that I go away, because when I go away, I will send the Comforter to you. He will never leave you or forsake you. And he says also in John, there's 14 through 17, somewhere in there, he says, I and my Father come and make our abode with you. See, Jesus on the cross, when he establishes this new covenant through his death, it is no longer do I need to go to Galilee to walk with Jesus. No, he comes to me. This is what the new covenant is about. He tore the veil in the temple. That temple is not where I worship God now. What is the new temple? Me. I'm his new temple. He has come and made his abode with me. He's with me. So as a little child, that's like him being here, right here, and the Father right here, with all the love that they have for me. This is what he wants me to remember. Remember, this blood, this is the new covenant. This blood, as often as you drink, the new covenant. Thank you. This body, this new covenant, is established. Thank you. He's right here. He's right here. He's with me. And it's not just that he's with me that I can ask him questions whenever I need to. Galatians 2:20 says, I've been crucified with Christ on that cross. It's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. And that's the beauty that I want to remember. See, it's not just that I can access his wisdom because he's right here with me, although he is right here with me, and that is amazing. But it's also him who is living his life in me now. So it's no longer I who live. He crucified me. Remember. I'm going to remember again. Remembering. I was crucified with him on the cross. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So if I don't feel like I can forgive someone because he's telling me to forgive someone, remember, it's no longer I who live. It's Christ who lives in me. That's the new covenant. I don't have to. He will. He lives in me. This is what I want to remember. And so for me as a little child, I see him taking the punishment on himself that I deserved, my punishment. And I see that love, but I also see him right here with everything that I need for everything that he's told me to do. Remember.